It's Asha, the Ego Alchemist, and today we're just gonna get naked. I'm gonna tell you the whole world something I've never told more than a few people. So, my mother, who passed away, was an incredible school teacher, sort of the original Montessori teacher down in Encinitas. And she lived this really simple life and worked so hard for so long. But she was this little intellectual and also this kind of secret little witch, she would go in and work with herbs in the kitchen all the time, her little kitchen in her little beach house. And she was always creating these random concoctions. And I was just a wild boy buried in ego, completely buried in it, you know, as deep as you can go, just into self. I don't say ego as arrogance and all of that. I understand the halls and layers of ego development as a species. Um, so I think around 20 years old, I was working as a bartender in Hollywood at a fancy secret celebrity spot. My schedule was 4 p.m. to 3 a.m., just a huge party and wildness and being young. And I would drive to go see my mom in my old vintage 72 Chevy truck down the 5 freeway in the rain at 3 in the morning to go visit her for whatever reason. And I woke up one morning on her living room floor in her little house, and there was this blonde SoCal woman sort of waking me up. And my mom had tried to wake me up, but I was so tired, probably a little hungover and whatever. And this woman came in and she goes, "Hi, I'm here to do numerology." And I was like, "Oh, great. Numbers? Like, what is this? 2 plus 6 is you're a this." I was like, I don't know what's going on. But I'm very open. I'm not mean about these things. I just know nothing. I don't believe any of this. I don't mysticism, all of that weird woo woo, come on. Um, and so she starts doing the reading. And she said things like, "Oh, you're a triple 11." I was like, I don't know what that means. Okay. So, and just, okay. And I'm a kid, I'm a punk. And she goes on with the reading. I'm half awake. We're just standing in the living room. I just woke up with one eye open and I'm like, what's happening? And so she finishes her reading. She was very sweet. And then she leaves. And as she's leaving, you know, I was an actor in Hollywood forever, black box theater, like highly trained actor. And we are walking lie detectors. You spend 4 hours a night studying how to be authentic in the inauthentic. We know every nuance, every trick. We could do that better than spies. So if you've ever seen the movie Ghost, she had this Whoopi Goldberg moment. This blonde SoCal mom is walking out and just stops and she gets excited. You could tell whatever's happening is making her happy. And she goes, "Somebody's talking to me." I, w- and she just turns and she goes, "You're blah, blah, blah." I was like, "What?" She was like, "You're Arcturian." But at the time I just heard, blah, blah, blah. I was like, "Great. Uh-huh. I'm gonna have some tea, I think. Ooh, I'll go down the street and get a mocha." They have those Mexican mochas I like, you know? Whatever. And she was like, "They're telling you to picture at the time these golden triangles, these tiny golden triangles coming in, and they have this square channel." And I was like, what is she talking about? What? And so she says, "Oh, they're giving you a mantra." And for the love of everything, I've never known that mantra, or I do know it and I don't realize it's that one, but I didn't listen to it. And then she said, "This has never happened to me before." I was like, "Okay." And she was clearly having some huge spiritual moment. I don't know what's happening. And so she leaves. Maybe years later, I was at the Bodhi Tree in LA, that great little wizard bookstore in Beverly Hills that's no longer there. And I was sitting with my ex-girlfriend on the ground and reading a book because they had this one book called We Are the Arcturians. I read the book, a little bit of it, And I thought some of it was fascinating, and the way they talked was weird. "We are doing this." It felt very like, that doesn't sound advanced or lovely to me. I now kind of understand why, but, I didn't really think anything of it. Nobody's ever heard this word. I've never heard this word. I've heard this word one time in my life. I've never talked about it. I've never asked anybody. I've never gone to any sci-fi things or whatever we called them at the time in some negative way, these space meetings. And so that's it. I'm the only one that I know that has ever heard that word besides me and this random woman who I've never seen again. So years go by, out of sight, out of mind. I'm in Hollywood. I'm on the fence of trying to have a career and try to be famous, but I hate it and I'm confused and my whole world is sideways and I don't know what's going on. And I'm living with this wonderful girl, Gina, and at this cute little Hollywood like apartment. And my friend Jason calls me this like he's like Black Jason. He's like he's just African. He Black Panthers. He's really in it, and we've always had this love-hate relationship like brothers. We never knew why, but we didn't hang out all the time or anything. We just were actors together and we loved each other, but like brothers who were fighting, over something, whatever. But he calls me up one night and he's like, "Hey, can we talk?" I'm like, "Sure." Well, I just come over to the house, and it's late at night or 9 or something. So I walk outside and just sitting on the stoop in LA and just he pulls up and tells me that he just came back from his Yahweh teacher. And I was like, "Oh, I don't know what that is. That's like the African god? Sure, I don't know." I'm not mean or anything. I don't know anything. And he goes, "She was doing crystal healing on me and one of them exploded." And she was like, "Your friend, Aaron, And he was like thinking of this other guy. And then it was like, "No, me, Asha, And he goes, "That him? Yeah. What? What about him?" And she was like, "You guys are brothers. Like you're connected. And you're both from," and he started to say this. And I said, "Wait, stop." And he was just really uncomfortable because he was being very vulnerable and talking about a crazy, huge moment he had just had that I may or may not judge or understand. And I go, "Wait a second, on the count of three." He goes, "What?" And I go, "Just trust me on the count of three. One, two, three, Arcturian." And my journalistic mind, who looks for at least three reputable sources, is calculating now I have two. I know this person. He's never going to lie. And why would he say this one word? Why would he say that? So this is just a mirror of what all of us are going through as we try to remember we have a soul. There's so much crazy stuff you learn that your ego, your wounded mind says, "There's no way I could be that good or that great, or I'm not an angel. I'm not this." And you go, "Well, yes, we all are. But it's this hard for me too." And it has been. It's taken me decades to unfold this. So at some point, my mom had also roped me into a past life regression. I want to call this woman Nancy Udall, but I cannot remember if that is even her name. And I was getting in the car. My mom's driving us down to San Diego to go to this hotel to go have past life regressions. What in the world is that? And I walk into this little hotel room expecting to see, I don't know, a witch doctor. I don't know. I don't even know why I said yes to this. And it looks like this little nun who has a pendulum or a crystal. And she was like, "Oh, I just finished cleaning the room as you had asked." And I was like, "Oh my God," when my mom was kind of conning me into this, I was like, "Well, tell her to clean the room or something spiritually. I don't know. Like, what voodoo is this? I don't want to go to some weirdo's apartment or hotel room and what?" Then I felt immediately surrender and like, oh my gosh. And there was such a gentle Christ like love, the Christo energy in there. this Yogananda energy. And so I I sat down, held this crystal. Actually, weirdly looks a lot like the one I always have. This and we went into a deep quantum hypnosis, and she had recorded it on a cassette tape, and I barely remembered any of it. I remembered dreams of being in Egypt, and she had asked, "What are you wearing on your feet?" And I looked down and I realized I wasn't. I just had this gold anklet on. And she was surprised by that because she said, "People don't lie about their shoes. I can usually tell if somebody's really there or not." So we were somewhere in ancient Egypt yeah, and the king was a maniac, and he was sending all of these people to war. All of our soldiers were just farmers and sons. They weren't warriors like we think of them in the movies. This is just dad and your brother getting ripped out of your house and going, "Go kill those people for me because I'm angry at them." And I was so furious at this person. And the next flash, I was at a pyramid that had steps. And I was watching them pull these giant rectangular stones to this pyramid. I knew exactly where I was standing. It was this visual. This is where the left side corner of the pyramid was. They were pulling in these giant dark gray rectangular slabs. And I just was saying, I don't want to be there, wherever that is, pointing to the kingdom. And we finished the regression. I don't really remember anything else. I was in Africa for a minute and got stabbed trying to avenge one of my sisters while I lived in a tribe. It was horrible there. It was like, I love Africa. I'm connected to it, but it was in the middle of a lot of war and darkness. So it was very difficult. But I come out of this thing and I don't know what just happened. I'm blank now. And I hand her this crystal and she kind of smiles and hands it back and she goes, "Feel this." And it's just boiling hot, but fine to the touch. It's like, that's weird. And I just had all of this illuminated energy inside. I was a kid, but I just felt, I was like 20 something, but I don't remember ever feeling euphoria like that. Just flowing through everything. I was like, wow, I feel really good. And then my mom went in actually afterwards to do her past life regression. I waited in the car. She came back an hour later or so, and she was almost really sad. She was not sad, but disappointed. She said, "We didn't get to do a past life regression. I had so much to deal with in this lifetime that I needed to release, so much karma that is being held in my own body that we did a body regression to try to clear the way, you know." So now I want you to know that I went through ego deaths, suicides. I started breaking open in 2018 to 2020, and my whole reality started to rip itself apart. And I had these people that were just awful egos, just sociopathic in the most gentle way. It wasn't obvious. It was behind the scenes, people who were pretending to be a certain way and who were actually lying and only serving themselves and all stabbing me in the back, who was like holding the whole thing together. And I was building this house, I was building this community, and the community lied and stabbed me in the back. And I was so gutted. I went into this, I went into my master bedroom in my own house in LA and tucked myself into the walk-in closet over in the corner, buried in a blanket, and I barricaded the door. And I was hyper aware of, this looks crazy. And I go, that's all I can do right now. I'm like a naked, angry, sad little vulnerable baby coming out, and I don't know what to do. I have to just go into this cocoon. And I tried to kill myself with pills. That's, a long story, but I went so far into darkness and the depths of sadness that at the end of that, you only find a compassion that is the scariest moment because it's the time that your own being says, "I can't stand to watch you suffer like this anymore either. Do it." Not your head, your soul going, "Do it. Enough. This is enough." And I became so infuriated with the ego, I started having flashes of Egypt. Then I started downloading immediately. I ran over and grabbed a notepad, an art pad that I had from college, and I never draw at all. And I start drawing out the human body, and I drew the circle around the head, a giant circle around the heart, and then another ring up here somewhere. And it just very clearly said, "You have three minds. Everyone does." I remember just being like, I can't tell the world they have three minds. This is 2020, we were all going through COVID and such chaos and shadow. We weren't paying attention to these things. And I understood the entire sensory system, the empathy systems, apathy systems. I understood the frequencies of them, the dimensions of them. It just all was so clear. And then it took me about 5 years to unpack that and study everything and embody it, learn it, become it. At first, I could understand things intellectually, but I had to go experience them, and I didn't know that. I learned about ego death, and then it happened and kept happening. You realize, oh, you have to go do these things. You have to become them. You don't actively try to do it. It's just going to come find you. And it was the dark night of the soul over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I looked at this boy who had lied, pretended to be sweet and kind and dumb, and was just taking from everybody to serve his wounded self. His ego was buried from being raised in a cult and all these horrible things. So I couldn't blame him. But I remember looking at it going, it's ego. And I'm going to find this thing and kill it. This is the virus of humanity. It's ego. So the house was on fire. And instead of fighting to exist, something in me just said, I will no longer fight to exist here. This is not community. They're not ready for this. Community doesn't do that. They don't lie and cheat for self-gain. If we're stuck in a state of self-gain, we can't do community. That's logic and rules and systems and control. That's a constitution. Constitution is structure. That's not what community is. It has to be fluid. It's a feminine frequency. So I was so furious and so sad, and I had nothing to lose, didn't care about anything. I just let my whole life burn down in LA, everything. And I got a backpack and I walked out the door, and I took whatever little money I had left from separating from this patriarchy and ended up in the middle of the Amazon jungle doing ayahuasca with Shipibo shamans and in complete misery and isolation in a little hut with mosquito netting in the middle of the most wild jungle I've ever experienced in my lifetime. It was devastatingly lonely and powerfully healing. I'd say for anybody stuck in the wounded masculine, go down and do a 30-day dieta in the Amazon. Nowhere fancy, nowhere expensive. You have to be of the earth. This is between you and earth. It's not a vacation. This is a powerful transformation. She's humbling. She's healing. And thus the journey began, I suppose. Long story short, I came back to LA after the most insane, what turned into 6 months of living in a dried up river with a crazy guy who couldn't speak any English, who was wounded and ran a closed down hostel next to some sacred pyramids they just found. Just me and this guy with a whole bunch of rabbits in the shadows he'd kill and eat, a bunch of crazy security dogs chained up all around. These weird gangsters out there that were always trying to find me. It was a thing. And I had nothing. Just nothing. No friends, no anything. I disconnected from all of it. Let it burn. Let it go. I did. And if anybody thinks it's cool to leave this country, that was one of the most painful things I've ever done. To walk away from your life, the life that you have in your mind, that's the hardest part. That's your Siddhartha moment. Siddhartha wasn't the rich kid, the trust fund baby. It's saying, can you leave the kingdom? Can you leave materialism? Can you leave a perception of safety and comfort that you can control through money? That is the paradigm shift. It is the opposing side of how we are naturally. So I left. And after I had nothing, and I was like, I can't believe I have to fly back to America, after 6 months and whatever. And I was still in pieces. I was more in pieces than I ever was. And now I was starting to wake up and channel some soul things. And all this information is just pouring through me, everything. I came back to America. I remembered that I left my new Jeep Cherokee because I love to just drive out into nature and boulder my way into places nobody can go. And there it was on the 11th floor because I had been on a movie set 2 days before I left and I forgot to change the license plates. So the automated cars in the garage didn't know I'd been there for 6 months. They would have towed it. It'd be gone. Just happened to be that way. I think I cried a little and hugged it. After the journey I was on, it was Siddhartha. I was just dying and in death at all times, in darkness and facing everything and waking things up, and I was alone. So got in my Jeep, stayed with a friend for a couple seconds and realized I couldn't be anywhere near LA. I just couldn't. I started living out in nature, 40 miles up into the mountains outside of Pasadena, and I'd drive down every day and go work and then drive all the way back up there just to be under the stars where it was safe. Nature was suddenly safe. The forest was suddenly safe because I'd been through the Amazon and been with the giant monkeys and snakes everywhere and tigers and bats and big old spiders, and just becomes normal after a while. This is all things that our mind is afraid of. And driving through Santa Barbara, living up in the hills for a minute, just realizing that it's time I have to go to India and go to Yogananda and do these things for no reason. I don't know. And I drove into town and my brand new, perfectly cared for Jeep lit itself on fire and exploded in the middle of the street in downtown Santa Barbara and covered the whole 4 block radius in black velvety smoke as the engine just was a complete explosion and inferno. And then I watched my Jeep with my stuff in it, everything I had left burned to the ground. Just sitting with this deli owner, little sandwich deli. Stellantis, the Jeep owners, their emergency department said they'd take care of everything, send a new car, send a tow truck. 8 hours went by and they couldn't do a thing. And when I called them back, they'd gone home. And they had told my insurance they were taking care of it. My insurance then dropped out and said, well, it's not our responsibility then. And so they both patriarchied their way out of it. They did nothing. To this day, Stellantis has never done anything for a brand new Jeep under warranty, under manufacturer warranty, that blew up and had a complete review by one of the highest level fire marshals in California, who said this was 100% manufacturer's error. This boy took care of this thing and it was brand new. So it was all covered under their own stuff. And to this day, if I email them, they just try to ignore it. They responded once and then realized they were liable again and then ignored me again. I was like, I hate this place. And then I was immediately back into suicide and talked to this wonderful woman on a suicide hotline who just happened to be a miracle and taught me some tapping and energy work, which was weird. She was like, I'm not supposed to talk about this stuff, but I feel like you're open to it. Hop, skip, and a jump. I ended up on a train and ended up in Ranchi, India, alone with nothing in the middle of nowhere. And from there, my whole spiritual world began. And I did 7 years of study with every guru and alchemist and spiritual place I could find on this earth. But I started writing this book called The Ego and the Self that was downloading all these master codes. It was a key. It's a key for humanity. It's literally saying he's identified one of the largest problems in all of human consciousness, and he's given you the keys for it. It's called The Ego and the Self. It's out there somewhere. You read that book cover to cover, it will pop that thing open and your awakening goes into full speed. Doesn't matter how weird you think the book is. Read it. Sit down. Be the student. Discover. But I started writing this book and I remembered the past life regression and I found the tape. And I didn't have anything to play cassette tape. I live in the now. I have now technology. So I had to send it in somewhere. And it was like 6 weeks had gone by, 8 weeks. And I got a random email. It was like, here's your cassette. I was like, oh, right. And I press play. I've never heard this before, ever. It's been, at this point, 20, 15 years, 12 years, I don't know, 15 years. And I'm listening to it. And the part where I'm talking about the king of Egypt, and I hear her voice say, "What is it?" And my voice drops and I go, "It's ego." As if that had something to do with everything. And I'm staring at a book I'm writing about the new keys and codes for human consciousness that all relate to the ego. I was like, well, how is that happening? Why was I talking about ego in Egypt? How is that? What? Because these things take years to unfold. Your past life won't make sense right away. Some things feel really exciting, but it's years. It's like an abstract painting that you don't really get until you look at it with the right keys, the right awareness, and suddenly the configuration reveals itself in a different way. But on this journey around the world, I walked the Nile and did the initiatic path of every chakra alignment after studying deep energy work and Reiki mastering in India. I was connecting with the earth chakras through the Nile and all the temples. And we got to Saqqara Temple, me and this girl from America who we'll call Lily. And I didn't even get to the ticket gate. I was at the ticket gate, not even at the complex, the big Saqqara pyramid complex. And I saw just a wall of menus of charging you. You want to stand over there? $50. You want to go stand over there? $10. You want to go stand over there? Stand over there. And I was very personal. I was just very sad. And I erupted a bit. And they even had to go find a specific guy, an Egyptologist, this young, sweet Egyptian man to come over. And we just started talking. And I started telling him my truth and what I could feel and from this higher awareness. And he started listening. But before we left, he said, please just buy the ticket for going under and going inside. It's another $40, whatever. I was like, nah. Everybody's been ripping us off. Everybody's stealing. Everybody's greedy. Everybody's stuck in this loop here. It's not them. It's our collective thing. It's collective energy. It's no blame, no judgment. It's my fault. It's our fault. But I was just standing up for something that I didn't even know I believed in. And I was making sense. I think Lily secretly recorded that. She has that somewhere in her phone. But whatever. We looked down and our little cabbie's still sitting there. And I was like, what are you doing? Are you waiting for us? And he goes, yeah, to drive you up to the main thing. And I look up and there's a fresh road that goes right to the front of the pyramid filled with buses and tourists and selfie sticks. And I was going crazy. I was like, I can't. So can we just walk through the desert? And they were like, of course. No one does, but sure. So Lily and I took off our shoes and walked through the desert to Saqqara Pyramid. And, I was like, this isn't it. This isn't it. Must be something else, or I don't know. And then we turned all the way around the corner and got out to this kind of plateau. And I stood right in one spot specifically, and it just all clicked. And I go, it was right here. This is where the edge of the pyramid was. This was their things, but it wasn't these stones. They weren't this small. They were larger and darker and rectangular, and they're very specific. And I laid down on that rectangular bed on the lower corner in Egypt, and it was like a healing center. It wasn't whatever they think this is. And I pointed across the desert. I go, I know I didn't want to be there. And Lily and I looked down my finger in the far off distance of Cairo, and the dust kind of spreads, and we see Khufu. We see the main pyramids of Giza, the kingdom. And it was like I pointed right to it, like I knew I couldn't be there. So we walk inside and go down, pay our ticket, or give the ticket to the other guys. Money exchange, money exchange. No, sacred, stop it. And we get into the hall and immediately I go, this is a hospital. This is an energy hospital. This is not a tomb. She goes, how do you know? I go, I can feel it. And look, there's no inscriptions on the walls. It's not covered in stuff. It's natural. It's shaped for fluidity. It's energy. Somebody very high up made this, and I guarantee it was someone connected to Thoth. An alchemist made this. And we start walking down the hall, and I just feel all of it. And I go, if we get to the end of this hall, there's a big opening with a base down here, and we're walking through this corridor. And I was like, if we get to the end of this and look down and there's a giant gray stone slab bed, I helped build this. We get to the end, we look down and just, okay, I've been there in a past life as the prince who was trying to do something and help the world, and it was about ego. And then the memory of my past life goes, the last thing you say when you die is what you're gonna do. And I said, I will fix this. So this is the moment that you are in your desert of duality. You're between your ego and your soul, yourself and your soul. And because of all of the work that had gone on, all of the loving little nudges my mother sent me into, and all these different little moments were all leading right to here. Here I was. My ego doesn't believe this, but my soul knows this. How does it know this? I understood King Djoser, and he, commissioned the step pyramid, but it was built by Imhotep. Imhotep is an alchemist, the vizier of Ptah, Ptah, Ptah. Now, if you know anything about Ptah, Ptah connects all the way back to Mesopotamia, to Enki, Enki and Enlil, the lord of the wind, of movement, of chaos, and Enki, the protector of earth. Those were masculine and feminine. So the Enki line is where we would feel the Order of the Rose, the Mary, the Yeshua. Those are coming through the guardian of earth, Gaia, Taura. And Imhotep built this as a healing temple. This is not a tomb. Every Egyptologist I've ever spoken to has told me this is a tomb. And I said, no, it's not. This is a healing temple. That's why Imhotep built it. So if you look at the origins of the word itself, Saqqara is actually Sukkara, and it doesn't mean the city of the dead. Sukkara comes from Sokar, and Sokar is one of the oldest deities of deep earth. So the crucible of Sokar, it represents the profound darkness where our transformation happens. So this is quite literally a temple of shadow work. It understood that you must descend into the dark to reach the light in the heart. So no, this was not a tomb. And for me to be there in this duality was like standing in a hospital and they had built graves everywhere and said, no, this is a tomb. And I said, no, it's not. This is an alchemical healing temple. And you have memories now of people who would travel there and you'd spend all night in it. You had kings running around in circles trying to activate it. But when I stand in that room, I feel the vortex of energy pulling from the materials below and above, but it's weak. It's not working anymore. And why is it not working? Because we robbed it. This is where we see that everything is a mirror. We robbed this temple. We stole the beautiful white limestone. These used to be stunning. These were holy places. And we robbed its material to do what? To build a city of men. We robbed the materials of the divine feminine to build a city of man. Monotheism. So what's very interesting is if you follow this line, Enki, Ptah, Imhotep, suddenly 2 more figures arrive. So the first one you get was Prince Userefre, which was 2465 BCE, the 5th dynasty. He did a solar realignment, and he was the first one to restore this temple specifically in honor of Imhotep and in honor of the great feminine, the healer. And then another prince came along, Prince Kaemwaset, and he was in 1250, also known as a high priest of Ptah. So we keep seeing this connection to Ptah. Ptah goes to Thoth, Thoth goes to Enki. These are the lines of feminine wisdom coming in through a patriarchal system. And this is what I call the shepherds of the feminine. Both of these princes restored the Saqqara complex, the Saqqara temple. They both understood it was something more than a prize or a tomb. There's even hidden walls in there where they found statues of Djoser in like the 26th dynasty or whatever. Um, but I see an example of something sitting there right now that if all of us went over there and decided to restore it once again back to its feminine principle, we would reactivate this entire temple. Um, so, in short, it wasn't until later that we recognized its true power. And at that point, we called it the Asklepion. And even the Greeks, when they arrived, they recognized Emotet. They understood pure wisdom. And they even concocted their own word for the god of medicine, Asclepius, from this exact pyramid. So, do I know how to restore it? I don't know. I don't know if I've done it once or twice, or I was just there to help. I was the young boy trying to restore the feminine principle on this earth. But what I do know is that it can be restored, and this is one of the most powerful healing temples that we have on earth. So that is the truth of the Saqqara pyramid complex. It is the Saqqara temple of Ka rejuvenation. So this is how I feel about really star seeds, light workers, earth angels, all of that. I look at star seeds more like if you were looking at Hogwarts. If you saw the teachers of Hogwarts, those are star seeds. You know, we're not going to all be beautiful and pretty. We're weathered, we're tired, we're hurt, we're injured, we've struggled, you know. So I think I would be more like Mad Eye Moody if he walked in the middle of dinner and was like, where have you been? That's like, oh, out battling darkness and things like that. But I'm all right. So you know, this was just something that happened along the way. This was not a reckoning for me to become connected to this prince. It really had nothing to do with that. It really doesn't. So I don't know which prince I was or what the exact um, details of those lives were. All I was being shown was what mattered to me in this lifetime. And that was to understand my connection to this line, to this ego, to this soul map is what we're really starting to see. Your soul has a map. And that's why I love Gene Keys. I look at that all the time when I need to check in with where is my soul going. So take this for what you will. Everything that I say is coming with an expectation that we will start doing our own homework. You have all the information you'll ever need right at your fingertips now. And that is not genius AI. That is all of us. That is all of us that have been hiding in the shadows, pouring all of our truths and our keys and our knowledge into this shared system. So this is a digital form of unity mind, and it's something we can see a reflection in of what's coming next for our own heart connection space. So that is me. I'm going to go back to work and keep doing what I do. I'm finishing up the 7 Chakras app. I've noticed a lot of clients are taking courses, spending lots of money, and they're not embodying anything. So that's where master teachers come in, and I'm right here and I'm ready. So I'm working away on these tools and I'm on to the next thing. I will see you all out there somewhere in this world. Be well, be happy, be light, and I'll be here.